am Celeste Davenport.
I am Hannah. Follow this beautiful fictional story of overcoming an achievement about my dad who lost our mom, but loved me very much and decided to turn things around. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like.
Lewis Jones pressed his access card against the construction site security gate. The metallic beep echoed in the dawn silence, a sound he had heard 6 days a week for the past 3 years. At 30 years old, his hands carried the calluses of honest work. Rough palms that had scrubbed floors, lifted buckets. Each callus told a story of work and dignity. "Daddy, can we eat pancakes after school today?" Hannah's voice came through the phone's speaker as he walked toward the skeletal structure of what would become Meridian Tower, a 50-story monument. Emma's mom is taking her to that place with strawberry syrup and funny-shaped pancakes. Lewis felt a tightness in his chest, the kind that came whenever Hannah asked for something that collided with his economic reality. Emma lived in one of the townhouses near the school, the kind with window boxes and doormen. Her mother drove a Mercedes and wore the type of casual clothes that cost more than Lewis's monthly rent. "We'll see, my girl," said Lewis, balancing the phone between his ear and shoulder while adjusting his worn blue uniform. The fabric was threadbare but clean. "How about I make Saturday's special breakfast for you? The one with chocolate chips arranged in a smiley face." There was a pause on the other end, the kind of pause 7-year-olds use when deciding whether to insist on what they want or accept what they can get. Hannah had learned early, too early, to accept what her father said. "With extra whipped cream?" she asked, and Lewis said yes, hearing his voice. "And maybe some of those blueberries if they're still good." Hannah giggled. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm persuasive. She says I should be a lawyer when I grow up." "Do lawyers make good money, Daddy?" The question was innocent, but it hit like a punch. 7 years old and already worried about money. 7 years old and trying to plan a career based on financial security instead of dreams. "Mrs. Patterson is a wise woman," said Lewis, forcing lightness into his tone. "But you know what? You're only 7 years old. You have plenty of time to decide what you want to be. Maybe a lawyer, maybe an astronaut, maybe a professional ice cream taster." "Daddy, that's not a real job." "Who says? I think it sounds perfect. You could eat ice cream all day and call it work." "You're silly, Daddy. That's my job. Being silly is a full-time position with excellent benefits." He stopped at the gate, swiping his card again to access the inner area. The construction site stretched before him, a forest of steel and concrete reaching toward the sky. "Now, you have exactly 7 minutes before the bus arrives." "Teeth brushed?" "Yes, Daddy." "Backpack ready? Did you remember your library books?" "Mrs. Chen will be disappointed if you forget again." "They're in my backpack. I put them there last night so I wouldn't forget." There was pride in her voice, the pride of a child learning responsibility because she had to learn, not because she wanted to. "That's my girl. Smart thinking. And your homework. Did you finish those math problems?" "All of them, Daddy. And I got them all right because I remembered what you said about carrying the numbers." Hannah's voice got lower, more serious. "Daddy, do you think Mommy would be proud of me for getting good grades and remembering my library books?" Lewis stopped walking, his throat suddenly tight. 4 years. 4 years since Sarah's car had been hit by a drunk driver on her way home after picking up dinner. 4 years since his world had been divided into before and after, and he had to figure out how to raise a 3-year-old child while his own heart was still in pieces. "My girl, your mother is so proud of you every day, I promise you that." "How do you know? Can you see her?" "No. But I know because I knew your mother and she loved you more than anything in the entire universe. That kind of love doesn't stop just because someone is no longer here." He started walking again, needing movement to prevent sadness from swallowing him completely. "And I'm proud of you too. Incredibly proud. You're brave and smart and kind, and those are the things that matter most." "I miss her," Hannah said softly. "I know, sweetheart. I miss her too. But I have you, always. You'll always have me. Even when you're old and wrinkly?" "Especially when I'm old and wrinkly. I'll be the wrinkliest daddy in the nursing home." Hannah laughed again, the innocence of children never ceasing to amaze him. "I love you, Daddy. We're very happy. So give me your best roar so I know you're ready to conquer 2nd grade." Her lion imitation crackled through the connection, fierce and slightly off-key, and Lewis felt his chest tighten with the familiar ache of loving someone so much it hurts. 7 years old and already braver than he had ever been. 7 years old and already teaching him how to survive. That's my warrior. And to Saturn, and to Jupiter, and to all the galaxies that exist, she shouted back before the line went dead. Lewis stood for a moment in the empty construction site, phone still pressed against his ear, and allowed himself to feel the weight of single parenthood, the overwhelming responsibility, the fierce protective love that made him willing to scrub floors and swallow pride and be invisible if it meant Hannah could be a child just a little longer. Ryan pocketed his phone and headed toward the service entrance, his yellow gloves already pulled from his belt. The morning shift meant cleaning up yesterday's dirt before the real workers arrived. The engineers, the architects, the people whose names appeared on blueprints and in newspaper articles. He was part of the invisible infrastructure, society's scaffolding that held everything up while remaining determinedly unseen. There was a strange dignity in it, he had discovered, a kind of freedom that came from being overlooked. People said things near him that they would never say to someone they considered an equal. He had learned more about the construction industry, about budgets and kickbacks, about union politics and permit corruption, than most business school graduates would ever know. Invisibility was its own kind of power if you knew how to use it. The construction site vibrated with the particular energy of a delayed project. Somewhere above, a radio played classic rock, Tom Petty singing about chasing a dream, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted from the supervisor's trailer. Lewis headed to the third floor, where concrete poured the day before had left dust and dried residue on the temporary flooring. He worked methodically, the way he had learned to do everything, with precision and quiet pride. Each pass of the mop was deliberate. Each corner received the same attention as the center of the room. Marcus Aurelius's quote that he had read that morning echoed in his mind. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Lewis had spent 4 years trying to understand what that meant, learning that sometimes the obstacle wasn't external. It was the story you told yourself about who you were and what you deserved. He had been telling himself he was a janitor, that this was all he could be, all he was capable of. But standing there in the silence of a construction site, with honest work under his hands and a daughter who believed in him, he was beginning to suspect that this narrative was his prison. "Lewis, did you see the safety fire extinguisher yesterday?" Jorge Martinez, the site supervisor, called from the door. He was a good man, fair and respectful, which made him a rarity in Lewis's experience. "On the clipboard near the west entrance," Lewis responded without looking up. "Someone left it near the porta-potties. I moved it before it got damaged." Jorge shook his head with reluctant admiration. "You notice everything, don't you? I swear you're better than our actual site manager at keeping track of things. Last week you caught that electrical code violation before the inspector showed up. Probably saved us a $30,000 fine." "Just doing my job," said Lewis, wringing out the mop. The water in the bucket had turned murky gray, evidence of work accomplished. "Bullshit. Your job is to clean. Everything else is you being too smart for your own good." Jorge leaned against the doorframe, studying him with an expression Lewis couldn't read. "Have you ever thought about doing something else? I mean, you clearly have the brains for it. Hell, I heard you talking with Chen about structural engineering like you had a degree in it." "I like what I do," said Lewis. It wasn't exactly a lie. He found satisfaction in the work, in turning dirty things clean, in creating order from chaos. Fair enough. Jorge didn't push, which was one of the reasons Lewis respected him. "Speaking of which, there'll be some VIPs here today. The owner is doing an inspection. The real owner, not just representatives from the development company." Lewis's hands paused briefly on the mop handle. "The Davenport heiress?" "Yeah, Isabella Davenport in person. Inherited the entire empire when her old man died 2 years ago. They say when she took over the company she made it more profitable than her father ever did." Jorge's tone had a mixture of respect and caution. "They say she's ruthless. Fired 3 project managers last quarter for being over budget." "Efficient, not ruthless," said Lewis, surprising himself by defending someone he had never met. If 3 project managers were consistently over budget, that's a systemic problem. Sounds like she was correcting poor oversight. Jorge raised an eyebrow. "You sound like you've been reading the business section." Lewis shrugged. Sometimes the sports pages aren't enough. The truth was he had read everything he could find about Davenport development in recent months. Not for any particular reason, just out of habit. He had always been someone who noticed patterns, who collected information out of curiosity. Lewis, The janitor who had gone to MIT, who spoke 25 languages, who could analyze complex business strategies while scrubbing floors. The janitor who was pretending his mind didn't matter as much as it did. "So I suppose we should make sure everything is spotless," said Louis calmly, returning to his work. The mop made sounds as it glided against the concrete. "That's why you're my favorite janitor, Louis, you understand." Jorge patted his shoulder and headed back toward the stairs. "Keep up the good work. And try not to overthink things, okay? Sometimes a mop is just a mop." But it wasn't, Louis thought as Jorge descended the stairs. Nothing was ever just one thing. It was also a choice. It was also a story about who he had decided to be after the world took away who he was planning to become. Alone again, Louis returned to his task, but his mind had already shifted into a different gear. He had read about Celeste Davenport in the business section of the newspaper he sometimes retrieved from the breakroom trash. 27 years old and already commanding a real estate empire worth billions. Forbes had called her the Iron Butterfly, beautiful, privileged, and absolutely ruthless in business. The article had included a photo. Celeste standing in front of a completed building, arms crossed, expression confident, bordering on arrogance. The kind of woman who had never had to doubt her place in the world, who had been born into privilege and learned to wield it like a weapon. People like her didn't see people like him. He was part of the scenery, as noteworthy as the light fixtures or fire extinguishers, and that was okay. Louis had learned long ago that invisibility could be a gift, except lately, he had been wondering if it was really a gift or just another kind of hiding. At 9 o'clock, the site was transformed. The floors gleamed, the dirt and dust removed, everything impeccably clean for a work in progress. Ryan was finishing the stairwell, working his way down from the 4th floor, when he heard voices approaching. Sharp, confident tones carrying the sound of fine shoes clicking against concrete. He already knew it was a woman. Told them we needed the steel structure completed by the end of the month, not the end of the quarter. Every day of delay costs us money. The voice was female, confirming his suspicion. Ryan didn't need to see her to know who was speaking. He had heard that voice in his head while reading the Forbes article, imagining her giving commands and making decisions that affected hundreds of lives. He continued his work, moving efficiently out of the way as the inspection group turned the corner to the 3rd floor landing. There were 5, 2 men in expensive suits carrying tablets, latest generation tablets, a very stressed woman with a clipboard, an engineer he recognized from the site, and her. Celeste Davenport was exactly what you'd expect from someone born into Manhattan royalty and exactly what you wouldn't expect. Yes, she was beautiful. Honey blonde hair pulled back, turquoise blue eyes, royal blue suit and denim shorts with blue suede shoes. A stunning, elegant woman with golden glowing skin. But there was something predatory in the way she moved. A focused intensity suggesting she saw the world as a series of problems demanding immediate solutions. Something like, I don't know how to say it. She was too powerful to care about her appearance, her way of dressing. She was very confident. The entire building was marked with her perfume. Something incredible. What was the name of this perfume this woman used? I had never smelled something so special. Louis stepped aside, pressing himself against the wall, becoming part of the architecture. It was a skill he had perfected over 3 years. The art of occupying space without claiming it, of being present without being seen. He watched them pass the way prey animals watch predators. The foundation work is solid, the engineer was saying, gesturing toward the exposed rebar and concrete visible through an opening in the temporary walls. His name was David Chen, and Louis had overheard enough conversations from him to know the man was brilliant, methodical, and deeply concerned about cutting costs. Chen had a reputation for refusing to compromise safety, which made him both respected and sometimes difficult to work with. But I'm worried about the drainage system. The specifications in the original plans don't match what we're seeing in the geological surveys. Then fix it, said Celeste without breaking stride. Her voice left no room for discussion, only the absolute certainty of someone who had never had a decision questioned. That's what we pay you for, isn't it? It's not that simple, Ms. Davenport. The cost implications. Celeste stopped so abruptly that the project manager nearly collided with her. She turned to face Chen with the full force of her attention, and Louis saw the engineer straighten slightly under her gaze. It was the kind of attention that could be both a blessing and a curse. depending entirely on what she decided about you in the next 30 seconds, are less than the cost of a lawsuit when the building starts sinking into Manhattan bedrock. She finished for him, her tone sharp enough to cut. I didn't inherit an empire by being penny-wise and pound-foolish, Mr. Chen. If there's a problem, I want it fixed correctly. Budget adjustments can be made. Lawsuits and building collapses cannot be undone. Chen visibly relaxed, his shoulders dropping half an inch. Thank you, Ms. Davenport. I'll have revised specifications on your desk by Monday. Friday, she corrected, already moving again. I want to review them before the weekend and bring me a complete cost analysis, not just the immediate fix but long-term implications. I need to know if this is an isolated problem or if we're looking at systemic issues with our geological survey contractor. Lewis found himself impressed, despite his instinctive caution with people in power. She wasn't just rich, she understood the business, asked the right questions, pushed for solutions instead of excuses. There was an intelligence there that transcended privilege, a shrewdness that would have made her successful regardless of what family she'd been born into. There's also the matter of permits for the upper floors, Chen continued as they passed Lewis's position. The city is being difficult. Of course it is, it's New York. Celeste pulled out her phone, her thumbs already flying across the screen with practiced efficiency. I'll have legal reach out to the deputy commissioner. We have dinner scheduled next week anyway. Sometimes these things require a personal touch. Lewis caught the implications of that statement. The casual mention of dinner with city officials, the assumption that a call from her legal team would smooth bureaucratic obstacles. This was how power worked in the real world, not through confrontation, but through networks and connections and the silent exchange of favors between people who had attended the same schools and belonged to the same clubs. As they passed, Lewis caught fragments of their conversation shifting to material costs, supplier reliability, union negotiations. Celeste Davenport knew her business. That was clear. She wasn't just a pretty face cashing inheritance checks. She was in the trenches, asking questions that revealed a sophisticated understanding of construction, finance, and urban development. Ms. Davenport, said Chen as they paused near a window opening that would eventually frame a view of the Hudson River. The morning sun brightened, illuminating dust particles in the air and transforming the concrete floor into something almost beautiful. There's something else. The documentation we received from the concrete supplier. Some of it is in languages I can't verify. Chinese, maybe Korean. Technical specifications I need to translate to ensure they meet our standards. Celeste's attention sharpened. Why are we receiving contracts in foreign languages? Don't we have standard contracts requiring documentation in English? We do, but some of our international suppliers provide supplementary technical data in their native languages. Usually it's not a problem. We use translation services, but these are highly specialized industrial documents with proprietary terminology and hire a translator, said Celeste dismissively, already pulling out her phone again. I'll have my assistant send the names of 3 firms we've used before. Choose whichever can start immediately. I tried that route. The translation service said these documents would take at least a week, possibly 2, just to find someone qualified, and even then they couldn't guarantee accuracy with the specialized technical terminology. Ryan saw Celeste's expression shift from dismissive to irritated. Time was money, especially on an already delayed construction project. 2 weeks of delay could turn into months of problems. Wait, one of the suited men, whom Lewis recognized as the project manager named Gerald something, interrupted. Didn't you say you found someone on site who could help? I thought you mentioned that this morning at the scheduling meeting. Chen hesitated, his eyes flickering across the space as if looking for an escape route. His gaze landed on Lewis, who had moved to the far corner and was carefully cleaning a temporary grate. Yes. One of the maintenance staff mentioned he was familiar with several languages. I thought perhaps the janitor? The project manager's tone dripped skepticism bordering on contempt. Chen, are you seriously suggesting we trust critical technical documents to someone who scrubs floors for a living? Lewis felt the weight of judgment, the dismissals, the absolute certainty that if you were doing manual labor, it was because that was all you were capable of. He had encountered this attitude so many times in the past 4 years that it shouldn't hurt anymore. But it did. Every time it hurt. He seemed knowledgeable, said Chen. but his voice lacked conviction, as if he was already regretting bringing this up. We were talking earlier about structural integrity concerns, and he mentioned something about similar problems in Hong Kong construction projects. He was surprisingly well informed about international building codes and foundation engineering. Lewis kept his head down, his movements steady and deliberate. Maybe they would forget about this. Maybe the moment would pass and he could go back to being invisible. "This should be fun," said Celeste, and there was amusement in her voice. The kind of amusement that came at someone else's expense. The sound of privilege confronting absurdity. "Please, let's ask him. I could use a good laugh this morning." The cruelty was casual, almost thoughtless, which somehow made it worse. She wasn't trying to be mean. She simply couldn't conceive of a reality where the janitor could have something valuable to offer. Chen cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Lewis, isn't it?" Lewis straightened, setting aside his cleaning supplies with careful precision. "Yes, sir. I was just telling Ms. Davenport about our conversation earlier, about the language problem with the supplier documents." "I remember," said Lewis calmly. His voice was polite, carefully neutral, a voice that had learned to occupy minimal space. Celeste took 3 steps closer, her heels clicking against the concrete. Up close, Lewis could see the intelligence in her eyes, sharp and assessing. She was evaluating him the way someone might evaluate furniture in a thrift store. Curious but ultimately dismissive. "My engineer seems to think you can help us with some translation work," she said. "Something about speaking several languages?" There was a trap here. Lewis could feel it. But Chen had been kind to him and the man seemed desperate. "I have some facility with languages, ma'am," said Lewis carefully. "Some facility." Celeste's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's deliciously vague. How many languages are we talking about? 2? 3? The project manager laughed, a sharp bark of mockery. "Come on, Chen. Are you seriously wasting Ms. Davenport's time with this? The guy probably learned some basic Spanish and thinks he's a polyglot." Lewis remained quiet, listening, and heard someone say, "If he's scrubbing floors, it's because that's all he's capable of." The alternative was too disturbing. 25, Lewis said quietly. The silence continued. "Excuse me?" said Celeste, her tone shifting from amused to something harder. "Did you just say 25? 25 languages, ma'am. Some more fluently than others, but yes." The project manager's laugh came again, louder this time, accompanied by nervous chuckles from the others. Even Chen looked uncomfortable, as if Lewis had violated some unspoken protocol by speaking the truth. 25 was too much. "That's absurd," said the project manager, shaking his head. "Chen, I don't know what this guy told you, but—" "Which languages?" Celeste interrupted, taking another step toward Lewis. Her eyes were cold now, assessing him with the same ruthless efficiency she probably applied to financial statements. "Name them." Lewis met her gaze steadily. Something in him shifted, a door that had been carefully locked now opening. Marcus Aurelius whispered in his memory, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, German, Dutch, Russian, Polish, Czech, Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, Korean, Arabic, Hebrew, Farsi, Hindi, Urdu, Turkish, Swedish, Finnish, Danish, Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Celeste's expression didn't change, but something flashed behind her eyes. Surprise quickly shuddered. "That's a big claim for someone holding a mop." "Yes, ma'am," said Lewis calmly. "It is. You know what I think?" She turned to address her team, her voice carrying the particular cruelty of someone who never had to worry about being mocked. "I think we have someone here with delusions of grandeur. Someone who watches too many YouTube videos and thinks he's smarter than he really is. It's almost kind of sad." The project manager smirked, sensing blood in the water. "Should we call security, Ms. Davenport? The guy might be unstable." "No," said Celeste slowly, an idea clearly forming behind her eyes. "I have a better idea. Chen, do you have those problematic documents with you?" "In my briefcase, yes." "Get them." She didn't take her eyes off Lewis. "Let's settle this now. If our mop man here is telling the truth, he won't mind proving it. And if he's lying, which we both know he is, then he'll learn a valuable lesson about honesty." Chen retrieved a folder from his bag, his expression worried. He pulled out several documents, scanning them quickly. "These are technical specifications from the Chinese supplier. They're in Mandarin. Simplified characters. Highly technical terminology related to concrete additives and structural engineering. Perfect. Celeste took the documents and held them out to Louis, but when he reached for them, she pulled them slightly back. Just to be clear, these are confidential business documents. If you breathe a word of what you read to anyone outside this project, I will personally ensure you never work in this city again. Understood? Understood, said Louis calmly. Good. She handed him the papers, then crossed her arms, waiting. Whenever you're ready, and don't bother trying to use Google Translate or some app. I'll know. Louis took the documents as if opening the daily newspaper. The papers were crisp, expensive paper, the kind of documentation that suggested legitimacy. But even before he began reading, something seemed wrong. The formatting was too perfect, the company letterhead too elaborate. In his experience, actual technical documents from Chinese suppliers often had minor imperfections, slight misalignments, the occasional character that didn't exactly match the font of the rest of the text. These looked like someone had spent considerable time making them appear authentic rather than actually being authentic. He could walk away now. Could laugh this off, claim he was joking, accept the humiliation, and maintain his invisibility. That would be the smart play, the safe play. But Chen needed help. And something in Celeste Davenport's eyes, that absolute certainty that she knew exactly who he was and what he was worth, made the decision for him. Sometimes pride wasn't a sin. Sometimes it was the only thing between you and complete erasure. He began reading, his eyes scanning the Chinese characters with practiced ease. The document was indeed technical, full of specialized terminology about polymer additives, hydration processes, and compressive strength metrics. But it was also wrong. Subtly, carefully wrong in ways that only someone with deep familiarity with both the language and the technical concepts would notice. This is a specification sheet for a concrete additive called JX447, said Louis, his voice steady and professional, slipping into the cadence he had used during academic presentations years ago. The supplier claims it's a high-performance plasticizer that improves workability while maintaining structural integrity at significantly lower cost. The technical details describe an optimization of the water-cement ratio that supposedly allows for a 30% reduction in cement use, while achieving equivalent or superior compressive strength compared to standard formulations. He looked up from the document, and his eyes met Celeste's. He saw genuine surprise there, not mockery, not dismissal, but the sharp focus of someone realizing they had badly miscalculated. The marketing language is quite convincing, Louis continued, letting a note of skepticism enter his voice. They describe it as revolutionary, innovative, the future of sustainable construction, but what? Chen had moved closer, his expression intense. What aren't they saying? Several concerning things. First, the molecular structure they describe for the primary polymer doesn't match the performance characteristics they claim. The polymer they reference, polycarboxylate based with specific side chain modifications, that's real chemistry. But the way they describe its interaction with cement particles at the molecular level, that's theoretically sound but practically problematic. Louis pointed to a specific paragraph, though he knew most of them couldn't read the characters. They claim the polymer creates what they call optimized adsorption on cement surfaces, which is technically true for most plasticizers. But then they describe hydration curves, the way concrete hardens over time, that don't match what you'd get with this particular polymer structure. The curves they show would require different catalysts, different reaction mechanisms. Jesus, Chen breathed, pulling out his tablet and frantically taking notes. You're saying the chemistry doesn't add up? Not exactly. I'm saying the chemistry they describe is real, but it's not the chemistry that would produce their claimed results. It's like, Louis paused, searching for an analogy his non-technical audience could understand. It's like someone describing the recipe for chocolate cake but including the baking times and temperatures for bread. Both are real recipes, both are legitimate processes. But if you try to bake cake using bread parameters, you're going to have problems. The project manager had stopped smirking. The woman with the clipboard had her pen frozen above the paper. Even Celeste had gone very quiet. Her blue eyes locked on Louis's face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. What else? She asked quietly. Louis returned to the document. This wasn't just sloppy work or innocent errors. Someone had put considerable effort into creating specifications that would pass casual inspection, perhaps even professional translation, but would crumble under expert scrutiny. The test results they cite reference a laboratory in Shenzhen, the Huaxing Materials Testing Center. They claim independent verification of all performance metrics, compressive strength tests at 7 days, 28 days, 90 days, all showing impressive results better than industry standards. And that's good news, right? The project manager asked hopefully. It would be, except the date stamps on these tests are from March 15th to March 22nd of this year. And according to their own project documentation, Lewis turned to another page. They claim this product was already in use on 3 major projects in January and February, including a skyscraper in Singapore and a bridge renovation in Taiwan. Chen's face went pale. They backdated the certifications. Or the product usage claims are fraudulent. Either way, we can't trust anything in these documents. Celeste finished, her voice deadly quiet. The amusement had completely disappeared now, replaced by something cold and sharp. How much of this product have we already ordered? The project manager checked his tablet with trembling hands. 400 metric tons. Delivery scheduled for next week. We've already paid a 20% deposit. That's nearly $300,000. Cancel it, said Celeste immediately. Her tone admitted no argument. Everything. Every kilogram. And I want our legal team on the phone with this supplier within the hour. They will refund that deposit in full, or they'll be dealing with an international fraud lawsuit. She turned back to Lewis, studying him with an intensity that made him want to step back. But he held his ground, meeting her gaze steadily. Keep reading, she commanded. Tell me everything that document says. Every detail, no matter how small. For the next 20 minutes, Lewis worked through the papers, translating not just the words, but the implications. He identified 3 more significant discrepancies: claims about environmental certifications that didn't exist, references to industry standards that had been superseded years ago, and performance guarantees that violated basic engineering principles. Chen had his tablet out, frantically taking notes and cross-referencing with other documents. The project manager had stopped smirking and was now on the phone, presumably alerting the legal team. The woman with the clipboard had moved closer, watching Lewis's face as he read, as if trying to solve a puzzle. When Lewis finished, he returned the documents to Chen. His hands were steady, but inside something had shifted. A door he had kept carefully closed had been kicked open, and he couldn't figure out how to close it again. Where did you learn to do this? Celeste asked. She had moved to stand directly in front of him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Even closer, subtle, probably very exclusive. College mainly, said Lewis. Graduate school. Self-study. What did you study? Linguistics, comparative literature, some structural engineering, which is why I could recognize the technical problems. And you ended up scrubbing floors. It wasn't a question, but Lewis answered anyway. Life happens. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now, ma'am. Celeste's eyes narrowed. You just saved this project from what could have been $1 million mistake. Maybe more if the bad concrete had gotten into the building before we caught it. And you're standing here in a janitor's uniform telling me, life happens? Yes, ma'am. Stop calling me ma'am. You're what, 30? That makes you only 3 years older than me, and you sound like you're addressing your grandmother. She turned to Chen. How long has he been working at this site? Almost 3 years, said Chen. He was looking at Lewis with new eyes, reassessing everything he thought he knew. 3 years, Celeste repeated. And nobody noticed that the janitor speaks 25 languages and can identify complex fraud in technical documents? To be fair, Ms. Davenport, said the project manager, recovering some of his arrogance, it's not exactly standard procedure to question maintenance staff about their linguistic abilities. No, said Celeste slowly. I suppose it isn't. She pulled out her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen again. Chen, I want a complete audit of every supplier document for this project. Everything we've received in a foreign language goes to a professional translation service, a reputable one, not whatever second-rate operation we've been using. And I want independent verification of every material specification. That will take weeks, said Chen. Maybe months. Then it will take months. I'm not going to build a 50-story monument to my family name on fraudulent materials. She looked up from her phone, her gaze landing back on Lewis. As for you, I need to speak with you. Privately. The others exchanged glances, but no one argued. Celeste Davenport was not someone you contradicted when she used that tone. There's a conference trailer at the north end of the site, she said. Meet me there in 10 minutes. Ms. Davenport, I really should get back to my... That wasn't a request, Mr. Lewis. She turned and walked away, her team scrambling to follow her. Only Chen paused, looking back at Lewis with an expression that could have been sympathy or possibly warning. Lewis stood alone in the empty space, holding his cleaning mop, and wondered what exactly he had just done to his carefully constructed invisible life. The conference trailer was nicer than Lewis's apartment, climate-controlled, furnished with real office chairs instead of metal folding ones, and featuring an expensive coffee maker. When he arrived, Celeste was alone, standing near the window with her back to the door. Close it, she said without turning around. Lewis closed the door carefully, staying near it. The trailer suddenly felt very small. I don't like surprises, said Celeste, finally turning to face him. She had removed her blazer, revealing a simple white tank top that somehow made her seem both more vulnerable and more formidable. Especially, I don't like discovering I've been making assumptions based on incomplete information. I wasn't trying to deceive anyone, said Lewis calmly. No, you were just trying to be invisible. She moved to the small conference table and sat down, gesturing for him to do the same. Why? Lewis remained standing. With all due respect, that's personal. Not anymore. The moment you prevented a multi-million-dollar disaster on my project, you became my business. She leaned back in her chair, studying him. I did a quick search while walking here. MIT's linguistics department had a Lewis Walker in their graduate program 7 years ago. Completed his master's in record time. Was accepted into the PhD program with full funding. Dropped out suddenly without explanation in his 3rd year. Lewis's jaw tightened. It's you, isn't it? Celeste continued. The MIT prodigy who disappeared. There was even a small article about it in the alumni magazine. Rising star leaves program under mysterious circumstances. Your advisor was quoted saying it was a tremendous loss to the field. You're very thorough, said Lewis, his voice carefully neutral. I didn't become successful by being careless. She pulled out a chair and pushed it toward him. Sit. You're making me nervous standing there like you're ready to run. Reluctantly, Lewis sat. The chair was comfortable. Too comfortable. I'm not going to pry into why you left MIT, said Celeste, surprising him. Whatever happened, it's clearly painful, and frankly, it's not relevant to what I'm about to propose. Propose? I need someone to review every foreign language document associated with this project and all other Davenport development projects currently underway. We have 17 major construction sites in 3 cities. If this concrete supplier is fraudulent, there's no telling what else might be lurking in our contracts and specifications. Lewis felt his stomach tighten. You have translators for that. Professional services, which take weeks to deliver results and charge thousands of dollars per document. And based on what I saw today, they're not catching the kind of sophisticated fraud you identified in about 15 minutes. She leaned forward, her blue eyes intense. I'm offering you a job. Temporary contract position. 90 days to start. You review our documents, flag anything suspicious, and help our legal team understand what we're dealing with. The pay is $200,000 for the 3 months. Lewis's breath caught. That was more than he earned in 4 years of maintenance work. Additionally, Celeste continued, full benefits, childcare assistance if you need it. I noticed the photos of your daughter on your phone earlier, and a significant bonus if you discover anything else that saves the company money. Why? The word came out harsher than he intended. Why would you offer this to someone you were mocking 20 minutes ago? For the first time since he'd met her, Celeste looked uncomfortable. Because I was wrong, she said quietly, and I don't like being wrong, so I usually correct my mistakes quickly and decisively. I judged you based on your uniform instead of your abilities. That was foolish and unfair. Most people don't admit that. I'm not most people. She stood, moving to the coffee maker and pouring 2 cups without asking if he wanted one. She added cream to one and slid it across the table to him, somehow knowing or guessing how he took it. Look, I'll be honest with you, I don't know your complete story. I don't know why an MIT graduate is working in maintenance. Maybe you're hiding from something. Maybe you're punishing yourself for some past mistake. Maybe you really do love scrubbing floors. Despite everything, Lewis felt a smile tug at his lips. Whatever the reason, Celeste continued, you clearly have skills that are being wasted, and I'm a businesswoman. I see waste, I eliminate it. This is as much about efficiency as it is about making amends for my earlier behavior. Lewis picked up the coffee cup, cradling it between his palms. And if I say no? Then you go back to your life and I bring in a team of professional translators who will charge me 3 times as much and deliver half the results. Your choice. She sat down again, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. But before you decide, let me tell you what else I found in my quick research. Lewis tensed. Hannah Bell Walker, 7 years old, 2nd grade at PS 116. Her mother, your ex-wife, died 4 years ago in a car accident. Celeste's voice had gone soft, genuinely sympathetic. You left MIT 3 months after it happened. Took the first job you could find that offered stable hours and health insurance. You've been doing the bare minimum to survive ever since. Don't, said Lewis, his voice tight. Don't use my daughter to manipulate me. I'm not manipulating. I'm offering you a chance to give her more than just survival. Celeste met his eyes directly. $200,000 for 3 months of work. That's enough to get out of whatever cramped apartment you're living in. Enough to build a safety net. Enough to start thinking about a future instead of just getting through the day. Lewis stood abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, the construction site continued its chaotic dance. Cranes swinging, workers shouting, the constant hum of progress and possibility. He thought about Hannah, about the way she never complained when they had cereal for dinner because groceries had been tight. About the field trip permission slip he'd had to tell her to leave blank because he couldn't afford the $20 fee. I would need flexible hours, he said without turning around. I have to pick up my daughter from school at 3. Behind him, he heard Celeste's sharp intake of breath, recognition that he was saying yes. Done. You can work whatever hours suit your schedule, as long as the work gets completed. And when the 90 days are over, we'll evaluate. Maybe it turns into something permanent. Maybe not. But at minimum, you'll have 90 days of well-paid work and a resume item that's far more impressive than janitor. Lewis turned to face her. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. It seemed to feel something else, or respect. Why do I feel like I'm making a deal with the devil? He asked. Celeste smiled. A real smile this time, not the practiced corporate mask. Because you're smarter than you look in that uniform. The devil always offers what you need most. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept. Lewis thought about Marcus Aurelius again, about the Stoic idea that the obstacle becomes the way. He had spent 4 years trying to disappear, trying to be small enough that life wouldn't notice him and take away anything else he loved. But maybe invisibility wasn't protection. Maybe it was just another kind of prison. When do I start? He asked. Monday, 9 a.m. Report to the main office downtown. I'll have someone send you the address. Dress code is business casual, and for God's sake, burn that uniform. She extended her hand. Welcome to Davenport Development, Mr. Lewis Walker. Try not to make me regret this. Lewis shook her hand. Her grip was firm, confident, the handshake of someone who had never doubted their right to occupy space in the world. I'll do my best, he said. I know you will. She released his hand and gathered her things. One more thing. The concrete supplier. The Huaxing laboratory they referenced. My assistant did some research while we were talking. It doesn't exist. The entire facility is fabricated, which means this fraud goes deeper than just one set of documents. How much deeper? Lewis asked. That's what I'm paying you to find out. She paused at the door, looking back at him. You saved us from a disaster today, Lewis. I have a feeling you're going to find several more before this is over. The question is, how much are we going to discover that we didn't know we needed to fear? She left without waiting for an answer. Lewis stood alone in the conference trailer, holding a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm, and wondered if he had just saved his life or entered into something far more complicated than a simple translation job. His phone vibrated. A message from Hannah. Mrs. Patterson says I can bring someone for career day next month. Can you come and tell everyone about your work? He looked around the trailer, at the expensive furniture, the state-of-the-art equipment, the window overlooking a construction site that suddenly represented possibility instead of just a place he cleaned. A week ago, he would have had to tell Hannah that janitors aren't really invited to career day. Now he might actually have an answer that would make her proud. He typed back, I'll be there, my girl. You can count on it. As he walked back to collect his cleaning supplies for the last time, he realized he felt something shift inside him. Not exactly hope. Not yet. But something close to it. Maybe this was what redemption looked like. A ruthless CEO, a fraudulent concrete supplier, and a chance to be more than the man he had tried so hard to become. The obstacle, Marcus Aurelius whispered, becomes the way. Louis collected his mop, his bucket, his yellow gloves. He would hand them over to Jorge that afternoon, along with his resignation. But for now, he had a few more hours of honest work to complete. And then, on Monday, he would walk into Davenport Development's main office and discover how deep the fraud really went, and how much danger Celeste Davenport had unknowingly invited into her controlled world. Because Louis Walker had spent years learning to be invisible, but he had never forgotten how to see, and what he had seen in those Chinese documents was just the beginning. Monday morning arrived with the weight of possibility. Louis stood outside Davenport Development headquarters in downtown Manhattan, adjusting the collar of his button-down shirt, not expensive but clean and pressed, and trying to remember the last time he had entered a building as something other than maintenance personnel. The lobby was all glass and steel, soaring ceilings and abstract art. People in tailored suits moved with purpose, their shoes clicking against marble floors, their conversations punctuated with industry jargon and casual references to millions of dollars. Louis took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked through the revolving doors. The next 6 weeks became a revelation. Celeste installed him in a small office on the 23rd floor. Nothing fancy, but it had a window and a door that closed, which felt luxurious after years of break rooms and supply closets. His task was straightforward: review every foreign language document in Davenport Development's active projects, flag concerns, and coordinate with legal about findings. What he found was staggering. The concrete supplier wasn't an isolated incident. Across 17 construction projects, Louis discovered a sophisticated fraud network. Suppliers using nearly identical documentation with slight variations, all pointing back to the same non-existent testing facilities in China, Taiwan, and South Korea. The scheme had been operating for at least 3 years, possibly longer, and the estimated exposure was approaching $50 million. How did no one catch this before? Celeste asked one evening, leaning in the doorway of his office. She had started showing up around 6 p.m., usually with coffee and questions. It had become a ritual neither acknowledged but both seemed to need. Louis looked up from his computer, his eyes tired but alert. Because they were smart about it, they varied the suppliers, the laboratory names, the documentation formats. Unless you read all the languages fluently and had expertise in material science, you'd never see the pattern. Even professional translators wouldn't catch it. They'd translate what was there, not recognize what was missing or inconsistent. But you saw it immediately. I told you the janitor would surprise you, haha. He smiled, and so did she. He said without bitterness now. Somewhere over the past few weeks the pain had faded, replaced by something that felt almost like forgiveness. Celeste winced slightly. Are you ever going to let me forget that? Maybe. After another 40 or 50 years of you not being terrible. She laughed, and Louis realized with some surprise that he had made her laugh several times in recent weeks. The iron butterfly had layers. She was still ruthless in business, still demanding and rigorous, but there was also curiosity there, and something that might have been loneliness recognizable because it matched his own. I spoke with Hannah's teacher today, said Louis, changing the subject. She wants her to skip ahead in reading. Says Hannah is already at a 4th grade level. Of course she is. She's your daughter. Celeste entered the office, settling into the chair across from his desk with practiced ease. Are you going to let her skip? I don't know. Part of me wants her to have every advantage, but part of me worries about her being the youngest kid in class. Socially behind, even if intellectually ahead. He rubbed his eyes. Parenting is one impossible decision after another. You're doing well. Better than well. Celeste's voice had gone soft. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the reason He stopped, surprised at how close he'd come to opening that particular door. The reason you what? Celeste asked gently. Louis looked at her. Somewhere over 6 weeks she had stopped being the cruel CEO who mocked him and become something else. A colleague. A friend, perhaps. Someone he trusted despite every instinct saying trust was dangerous. The reason I stayed alive, he said quietly. After Sarah died, I had a 3-year-old who needed me, and that was the only thing that mattered. Everything else, MIT, my research, my plans for the future, none of it meant anything compared to making sure she had a father who showed up. Celeste didn't look away, didn't offer platitudes. That must have been terrifying. It is. Lewis smiled slightly, but also clarifying. When you're responsible for another human being's entire world, your own problems suddenly seem more manageable, or at least, less important than theirs. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the office quiet except for the hum of the city 23 floors below. I have news, said Celeste finally. Legal finished their investigation. The fraud network. It goes even deeper than we thought. The suppliers were shell companies owned by a consortium that includes 2 of our former project managers and a VP from our materials procurement department. Lewis sat up straight. Inside job. Very inside. They'd been systematically overcharging us for years, pocketing the difference and providing substandard materials that looked legitimate on paper. You uncovered systematic theft that's been happening since before I took over the company. How much? Conservatively, $73 million over 4 years. But the criminal exposure, if they'd actually used all those fraudulent materials in our buildings, could have been in the billions. Lawsuits, building collapses, deaths. Celeste's voice was steady, but Lewis could see the emotion beneath the surface. You didn't just save us money, Lewis, you may have saved lives. The weight of that settled over both of them. What happens now? Lewis asked. Now? Legal is coordinating with the FBI. There will be arrests, probably by the end of the week. Congressional hearings maybe, given the scale. And Davenport Development will implement new oversight protocols, triple-checking everything. She paused. And I'd like to offer you a permanent position, Director of International Compliance and Translation Services. Salary commensurate with your actual skills, full benefits, flexible schedule for Hannah. You'd build a department, hire a team, ensure this never happens again. That's a real job for someone with your skills? Yes. Should have been obvious from the start, but I was too busy making assumptions. Celeste met his eyes. I was wrong about you, Lewis. Spectacularly, embarrassingly wrong. And I'd like to spend the next few decades making that right, if you'll let me. There was something in the way she said it, decades, not years, that made Lewis's heart skip. This wasn't just about business anymore, and they both knew it. I'll need time to think, he said, though his answer was already yes, had been yes since the moment she offered him a chance to be more than invisible. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. 2 days later, Lewis stood in Hannah's classroom for career day. He wore a royal blue suit and carried a briefcase with photos of his work. Daddy! Hannah burst toward him. You came. I told you I would, warrior. He picked her up in a hug. As he explained to the second graders how languages could unlock puzzles and how being observant could change everything, he saw the way Hannah watched him, with absolute certainty that her father was someone worth being proud of. And for the first time in 4 years, he felt that maybe she was right. That evening at the park, Lewis pushed Hannah on the swings and told her about the permanent job offer. Does that mean we have to move? Hannah asked, dragging her feet in the wood chips. No, but we could get a bigger apartment. Your own room, with a desk for homework. Hannah's eyes lit up. And bookshelves? And a bicycle? Definitely. He paused. It would also mean money for field trips and maybe even vacation someday. I think you should take it, Daddy. But only if you want to. Not just because of the money. Lewis felt his throat tighten. 7 years old and already wiser than he'd been at 30. I want to, he said honestly. He said, I want to show you that setbacks don't have to be endings. They can be beginnings if you're brave enough. Like your Marcus Aurelius book says. Exactly like that. He pulled her into a tight hug and kissed her forehead. When did you get so smart? I have a good teacher, said Hannah into his shoulder. He's my dad. And on Friday night, Lewis knocked on Celeste's office door. I accept. The job. I accept. Celeste's smile was genuine, unguarded. Good, I'm glad. One condition, though. Have dinner with me and Hannah. Saturday. She wants to meet the person who gave her dad a chance. I'd love to. Saturday at 6. Pizza. Hannah's choice of toppings. Let me guess, pineapple? Lewis smiled. You'll have to find out. He paused. Thank you, Celeste. You saved my company, but more. You reminded me that the people we overlook can be exactly who we need most. They stood in her office, and something passed between them that wasn't exactly friendship. It was passion, then finally the first kiss. When Louis left the building that night walking toward the subway that would take him home to Hannah, he thought about the past 2 months. How one moment of pride, refusing to remain invisible, had changed everything. How humiliation had become opportunity. How the obstacle had truly become the way. His phone vibrated. A message from Hannah. Did you ask her? Is she coming to dinner? He typed back, she's coming. Better practice your interview skills. 3 dots appeared, then, I'm going to ask her everything. Love you, Daddy. Louis smiled, pocketing the phone. The subway platform was crowded with people heading home, each carrying their own stories of triumph and struggle, of deferred dreams and seized second chances. He was just one more person in the city's flow, no longer trying to disappear, but also not needing to stand out. He was Louis Walker, father, linguist, fraud investigator, father, and now a boyfriend in love with the CEO, one of the most beautiful women in the state. And tomorrow, he would start building something new.